Oh, my dear lovely friends and listeners, thank you so much for joining today. Oh, thank you so much for the support for the short, for this video, Swimming in a River Called Denial. Got, almost 1,000 views within a day, which was amazing. I appreciate it so much. As this channel grows, this is a dream of mine. There's so many things I'm excited to talk with you about and want to get to know the community here and want to share my beautiful skating videos and the beauty of San Diego. So it's just a great way to bring that all together. And I just want to say thank you. Also, thank you for the support about Milo. I mentioned this one's from Milo, my amazing Papillon. He was 20 years old and he passed away a couple weeks ago. So he's always with me, and this one's for him. All right, so we were talking about defense mechanisms. Yes, and this is the defense mechanism series. We first started with projection, which was last week, and this week we're doing denial, which is a fascinating, primitive, powerful, often misunderstood defense mechanism. And I'm very excited to talk about it. So just to review defense mechanisms and Freud, Sigmund Freud, he laid the foundation for this work. Defense mechanisms are not random. They're intelligent, they're adaptive, and they're often the psyche's attempt to protect us from anxiety, shame, conflict, grief, resentments, emotional overwhelm. It's kind of like an escape hatch, actually. Very primitive one. Sigmund Freud laid the foundation for this work by describing the mind as in constant tension between instinct, morality, and reality. Later, his daughter, Anna Freud, expanded and organized many of the defense mechanisms we still talk about today. And these are common day jargon. Anna and Sigmund Freud laid the framework for a lot of pop culture words that are enduring today and gaining. I mean, just the term the ego. I mean, that was Freud. I mean, it's been talked about obviously since the beginning of time and throughout religions, the ego and what it is, and through Buddhism. But Freud came up with ego, and that resonated with society. So he believes the ego, the part of the mind trying to function in reality, had to manage conflict from multiple directions. It has to. Raw drives, painful emotions, guilt, social expectations, external circumstances. And so what happens when reality is too painful, too threatening, too destabilizing to face at once? The ego protects itself. And it's cognitive dissonance, really. We talk about that a lot in therapy. And cognitive dissonance, cognitives are thinking states. And cognitive dissonance is there's a distance there. So it's like an ethical dilemma. There's a distance between thoughts. You're experiencing something that's in opposition, and you either have to blame something or take accountability. And what do? And the ego protects itself, and denial is one of the defense mechanisms. It's an unconscious psychological process that helps reduce distress when something feels too overwhelming to fully process. In simple terms, the mind is bending, distorting, redirecting, or blocking emotional reality in order to preserve functioning. And that is so important to understand because defense mechanisms are not always bad. In fact, sometimes they're very helpful, and they're the reason we survive. If we actually knew sometimes the danger of what we were doing at the time, we wouldn't be doing it. So, or if we'd actually put more thought into it, we wouldn't. You know, that sometimes there's never a right time to do certain things in life. You just have to do them. And so it's important that we use defense mechanisms appropriately and balanced, and not to a point of where denial can take us. What protect us in the short term can also limit us in the long term. So especially when defense mechanisms become rigid, chronic, or disconnected from present reality. In our first video, we talked about projection, seeing in others what we cannot yet tolerate in ourselves. Today, defense mechanism number 2, denial, or as I like to call it, swimming in a river called denial. Denial is, in classical psychoanalytic Freud terms, is the refusal to acknowledge some aspect of reality because accepting it could create too much psychic pain. Not because someone's unintelligent. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're trying to deceive other people. It's because the truth, or at least in that moment, feels unbearable to integrate. And that's Carl Jung's resolution to this, integration. So we'll talk about that later. The psyche says, no, not that, not yet. And that's denial. Denial can be obvious. It can be, I don't have a drinking problem, while clearly they're packing liquor with them, into stadiums and things. There will be people that say they don't have a drinking problem when they're concealing and carrying alcohol on them, which I find humorous, because I'm like, why do you have to conceal it? And then people will say, oh, because drinks are too much there. And then I'm saying, well, yeah, it's probably because you're drinking too much. Or they'll say they're not strong enough. And it's like, because you need more alcohol. It's just a defense mechanism. A person stays in a relationship full of betrayal, chaos, or emotional neglect and says it's okay, they're just stressed, or it's for the kids, or it's because I got married. But in the process, they're abandoning themselves. And it's not saying you should leave that relationship immediately. We're not talking about black and white terms, but we're first starting with bringing it into consciousness that there is something that's wrong or something that's causing dysfunction for you. Maybe a family member insists that's just how your sibling is, while ignoring years of emotional abuse, intimidation, or cruelty. It's about minimizing. Denial is definitely a form of minimizing, which is another defense mechanism we'll get to eventually. A grieving person initially may say this can't be happening because the nervous system literally cannot absorb the loss yet. And I mean, that's why you see delayed responses to trauma too, is denial is a defense mechanism, and it's what some people have to do for a while. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's, just natural. I'm talking more about long-term chronic use of it that's problematic and toxic. And it isn't the kind of use of denial that's not solving a problem. It's actually just prolonging one, perpetuating it. So denial can also be subtle. It can look very high functioning. It can look polished. It can look intellectual. It can look spiritual. It can sound like I'm choosing peace when really I'm just suppressing conflict. It can sound like I'm staying positive when really I'm refusing to face danger, grief, or disappointment. It can sound like I'm not angry while my body is full of tension, my sleep's disrupted, and resentment leaks out sideways in passive aggression or anxiety. And anxiety and denial definitely affects the body. There's many, many doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, myself included, that say what is not resolved emotionally, mentally will manifest physically, because your body is just, you're putting into a state of fight or flight when you're in a state of anxiety, and by at times denying things, we're perpetuating that, and it results in chronic sickness. Some as minor as colds, flus, and different things, and it's not that the illnesses are not occurring, they are, but they're perpetuated by unresolved emotional pressure and inflammation of the nervous system, basically. So what is not consciously faced often gets acted out in some way. That's one of the most important things to understand. They're not just thoughts. They become patterns. So, yes, this is why denial can become so expensive. Because if you fully admit the truth, something may have to change, and that's why people avoid it. But the longer you let it go, the more you are just really procrastinating the eventual kind of karma of your own life. It's like universal cause and effect. There is, a result to every cause. Cause as a opposite or equal reaction. So a lot of science and universal laws and psychology line right up, and this is one of them. It's why very intelligent, successful, articulate people can remain in denial for years. It's not a problem of IQ. It's often a problem of emotional readiness, ego fragility, attachment fear, trauma conditioning, or the cost of what truth would require Because if you fully admit the truth, something may have to change. If you admit the relationship's unhealthy, then you may have to change or you may have to leave. If you admit your parent harmed you, you may have to grieve the parent you did not have and like reparent yourself, take responsibility for your own self instead of blaming. If you admit the addiction's real, you may have to face shame, withdrawal. You may have to face that it's actually a pattern in your family and that maybe you're repeating something that your parent did to you. Accountability and loss of fantasy. If you admit that you're deeply lonely, you may have to stop pretending that choosing unavailability to people isn't working. And, that has to do with just isolation. Some people will tell themselves, I don't want to be with anyone, or I don't want friends, or I don't want love. And it's really just a denial of what a human being needs. Denial protects us not only from pain, but from action. This is why it's expensive, because reality doesn't disappear just because we refuse to look at it. It doesn't stop being true because it's emotionally inconvenient. A relationship can still be abusive while you keep explaining it. A coping mechanism can still be destructive while you call it stress relief. What we deny often doesn't vanish. It goes underground. It surfaces of anxiety, depression, numbness, compulsions. OCD is really just an addiction, a thinking addiction that is trapped in denial because, when you're practicing any sort of OCD, whether it's, your basic, cleaning compulsion, or if we're going into something else, which is, maybe checking behaviors around if people love you, or maybe you're controlling your partner and it's checking behaviors about, what's being done to make sure things are, lighting up for the week. And it's really about an unresolved anxiety in you and your denial to admit that you're not handling your own anxiety. Denial is really like just kind of a container for anxiety to, eventually come out in like different ways and different behaviors. So, or other addictions for dopamine kicks, to resolve that. This is where Jung becomes such a powerful extension of this conversation. Freud gave us the architecture of the defense mechanism. And Carl Jung, who studied under Freud and also deeply explored the unconscious, Jung helps us understand what happens when the disowned truth stays unconscious. Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That line applies beautifully to denial. If you are in denial about who someone really is, you may keep choosing them and call it chemistry. If you are in denial about your own needs, you may keep abandoning yourself and call it selflessness. If you are in denial about your own anger, you may become anxious, perfectionistic, brittle, depressed, rigid instead of direct. If you're in denial about grief, you may become emotionally numb and call it resilience. The unconscious always finds a way to speak, and denial often keeps the unconscious mind just blind enough for the pattern to continue. So what does healing look like? Yes. What are the solutions? There are some. Yes. Healing's not shaming yourself for denial. It's not becoming cruel. It's not ripping the defense away and flooding yourself. Healing's understanding the defense once served a purpose. Just like my OCD did, there's many things that worked for a while. Just memorizing information as a student used to be my go-to, and that served a purpose. Then I realized I had to do critical thinking and think conceptually and understand a discipline from all angles, and then I could take any question. I could talk to anybody. I have no problems talking to any client, anyone in the general public about psychology because I know it from all angles. That's what you actually have to do with yourself. You have to understand yourself from all angles. You can't memorize a certain way to be. You can't memorize certain virtues. You have to understand what defense mechanisms you've used and then how you can approach any question of life. You can approach any problem. I also describe it like this in sessions it's like a team playing together. You can have plays. You can practice the plays. You can memorize them. But you have to be able to perform. when it's game time. You have to be able to perform under pressure and understand intrinsically how to move through some things that are barriers, but not to be caught in the forest for the trees. And denial's part of this. It's so deep. It's so deep. So it's ego maturement, development. It's psychological growth. It's understanding that balance is needed even with defense mechanisms. And it starts with better questions. What do I already know but keep minimizing? What truth keeps trying to get my attention? It's all about patterns. You can argue down and do a straw man argument with yourself about anything and dismiss something, but it's not really about those individual situations. That's just material that's working within a system. So it's the mechanism at work. It's the denial. It's the avoidance. There will always be material to fill that in life, and you can argue that here or there and get caught all up in that. But that's just another defense mechanism, really. That's like intellectualization, Oh my goodness. There's just so many ways to do mental gymnastics. But what truth keeps trying to get your attention? Where are you calling something fine that's costing your peace? What am I protecting myself from having to feel, grieve, admit, or change? What would become undeniable if I stopped managing the appearance of stability? Because once denial begins to loosen, you'll get clarity. Clarity is painful, so people will try and turn around and think that this is like a sign that it's not a good thing to be doing. No, it's liberating. You're freeing yourself from the shackles that has been holding you. The moment you stop arguing with reality, you get yourself back. And that's what Carl Jung's talking about. Integrate it, accept it, radical acceptance. That's like a Buddhist concept that's been around for thousands of years since civilization started. You stop spending so much of your life maintaining illusions. You stop bargaining with what it is. You stop trying to rescue what is repeatedly harming you. You stop making excuses for what your body already knows. Once you see clearly, you can choose differently. That's where real change begins. Yes. So, if projection is seeing your disowned material in someone else, denial is refusing to see what it is right in front of you. And the work's not to become harsher, it's to become more honest and accepting of whatever it is, because it just is. But that does not create value one way or another within you. You are still valuable as a person. Your identity does not need to be sank into whatever you're denying. You can bring to the consciousness of it, and your identity doesn't need to be so linked to it that you have to put it back down in a hole. So, honesty is the beginning of freedom. Maybe that's the real mirror here. What truth you've been swimming around while calling it water. This is Freud's mirror. Swimming in a river called denial. That's today's reflection on denial. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for my skate. This is in Mission Beach. Like I said, this was St. Patrick's Day, 2026. It might have been around 4:30 p.m., I think. And just an amazing day. So thank you so much for supporting my channel. Please like, subscribe, and I'll be following up with a new short and a new long term on our third defense mechanism. I will see you then. Have a great day.